Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. We're really excited to meet with you. My name is Chris Johnson. I'm a group product manager working in Google Cloud Platform in the security business. I look after our regulated cloud solutions, and I'm really excited to chat with you today. Today, I have my friends Ashlea and Ganesh. Do you mind introducing yourself briefly?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Ashlea Parrish. I am with Equifax, and I run our Google Cloud Platform, as well as our cloud engineering teams that run our global scale for the enterprise.
Excellent.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ganesh Janakiraman. I head platform engineering at Broadcom with a very similar profile as what Ashlea said.
Thank you. We're thrilled to talk to you today about assured workloads and compliance without compromise. I am super excited to be up here. It's very fun to be actually on stage live for the first time in a few years. Excited and a little bit nervous too, so bear with us. All right, so assured workloads. When I joined Google about 7 years ago, they told me I was going to work on compliance. I was like, oh, I guess I do compliance. It turned out to be the best thing I could possibly do. I love this. We get to learn where all the security works in Google Cloud, how everything operates. I get to understand the platform inside and out, and it's been a lot of fun. And along that journey, we started working on things like FedRAMP, CGIS, IRS 1075. We'll get into the details of that in a few minutes. But really, what we found is we had to start thinking about compliance differently. And some of the challenges that we're facing right now is how do we keep up with what's going on in the world? Regulations are changing quickly, and we need to move into a proactive rather than a reactive stance from a compliance perspective. And we've really been making some changes to that. Additionally, we've also been looking at some of the problems that our customers face with traditional gov clouds. Now, we actually did our first gov cloud back in 2010. So we've actually been in this business for a long time. A lot of folks don't really understand how we grew and changed from that perspective. And when we started looking at the problem of gov clouds, we wanted to solve the problem of limited capacity. We wanted to solve the problem of velocity of services into the environment. We also wanted to make it a lot easier for customers to gain access to the environment and reduce the total cost of ownership relative to running those workloads. So we invented a new technology called Software-Defined Community Cloud. SDCC, as we like to use acronyms for everything, is the capability that's kind of driving our gov cloud solution, our government cloud solution. And Assured Workloads is the product that we built along those lines. And we launched it about 3 years ago, actually, and we've been in production for some time. And this is the product that allows our customers to gain access to things like FedRAMP High, like I mentioned, CGIS, ITAR, which we'll talk about briefly in a few minutes, as well as Impact Level 5 for our DoD customers as well. We're going to talk about that in more detail here in a few minutes. But the idea is to really simplify the experience of gaining access to those regulated cloud solutions and those government cloud offerings. Reduce that total cost of ownership, like I mentioned. We've got consistent APIs, so our customers are able to just as easily access the environment from the commercial capabilities as well as the government capabilities. Really makes it a lot easier and reduces that cost significantly by having a single supply chain for your software rather than different supply chains for each of your government customers that you need to work with. And it also reduces that compliance toil. It makes it a lot easier to achieve the outcomes that we're shooting for with our customers. And really, that's what we're shooting for with Assured Workloads, is we want to have this joint journey. We want to make sure that we're helping you out along the path to getting your compliance off your checklist to make it a lot easier to gain access to the environment. Okay, so to do that, there's a couple of controls that we've built to help along those ways. So Assured Workloads, again, the idea here is to gain access to that environment quickly and easily. There's a handful of controls that make it a lot easier. The first is enforcement of compliance products. One of the things I've heard from a lot of customers when they're working on GovCloud environments is they accidentally use non-compliant products a lot of times, resulting in a spill of data into applications infrastructure where it shouldn't be. And this was one of the first problems we took on, and we created this resource usage restriction capability, which makes sure that you can't accidentally use a non-compliant product when you're working with your GovCloud or government customers. The next is personnel access. This is a really big one and can be a really complicated topic for our customers. Actually, this was one of the ones that we had some of the biggest challenges at Google because we've built our infrastructure and talent from the ground up to supply our customers with the security and capabilities that they're looking for. But a lot of our customers, especially in government and regulated sectors, require that their people have certain capabilities or restrictions to them in terms of accessing from specific geographic locations, specific personnel access controls, maybe different background checks in the example of CGIS, and a handful of other capabilities. So we went off and solved this personnel access problem. And along with that, we launched Assured Support. So Assured Support allows you to still have that 24/7 response to your tickets and have compliant capabilities for that. So for example, with our GovCloud customers, our Assured Workloads customers, they'll use the US Persons Control. So we'll make sure that if your support ticket comes in, it's a US person that handles that from top to bottom throughout that entire experience. And finally, enforcement of that data location. Data location is such an important topic for our sovereign and government supply chain customers. So making sure that we've got strong controls that really make it easy. And if you're using US government, you speak the language of CONUS, which is my least favorite acronym of all time, because it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, you put it in CONUS, that data has to be in the United States. So the enforcement of that data location allows you to meet those regulatory requirements and achieve those outcomes for your customers. All right, so what does that mean? A whole mouthful of compliance acronyms. Now, the capabilities that we've launched over the last couple of years, these are all available in GA today, by the way. So these are highly accessible to you. EU regions and support with sovereign controls. My good leader in Ashlea spoke earlier this morning about the sovereign capabilities, so if you can, check out her recorded session. Australia regions and support, so allowing our customers to gain access to HCF and IRAP workloads in Australia. Israeli regions and support, another strong, important capability for our Israeli customers. Canadian regions and support, which includes Canada Protected B capabilities. So again, really opening that up. And then in the United States, of course, a whole bunch here. We see the healthcare and life sciences with HIPAA High Trust, FedRAMP Moderate, which has over 100 services that are capable of supplying your capabilities there. FedRAMP High, of course, the high water mark for a lot of our federal and civilian agency customers. FIPS 140-2, this actually, we'll geek out on this one for a minute because I love encryption. One of the things, when we set out to do this when I joined Google, my second week here, I had a meeting with Ors, and we were talking about FIPS 140-2 crypto. And we're like, well, we need X number of dollars to do it for the FedRAMP environment. And he's like, why don't you just do it for everything? So we did. So we put FIPS 140-2 validated crypto across the entire infrastructure. You can't not use FIPS 140-2 validated crypto, which makes it, again, if you're working in this public sector supply chain, that's a big issue, really hard to solve. We made it very, very easy. It reduces that total cost of ownership, makes it a lot easier to use those compliant workloads in production. And then, of course, a whole bunch of NIST standards. You'll look for your favorite up there, but there's a whole bunch more, of course. Whenever you do FedRAMP Moderate or FedRAMP High, there's a whole bunch of NIST capabilities that you have access to. And then, of course, one of my favorites here is ITAR, because I started working on ITAR 5 years ago. And it's exceptionally difficult because this is a regulation instead of a compliance framework. And I'm really proud to share that we have launched to production to GA ITAR in the last year. And we've expanded those services this summer to include things like BigQuery and some new capabilities for the user interface. So if you have ITAR needs, this is a really important capability. Impact Level 2 for our DoD customers. This is roughly equivalent to FedRAMP Moderate, even though the DoD has a few extra capabilities required with DFARS and a handful of other capabilities with CMMC. And then IL4, Impact Level 4, and also we're really excited about Impact Level 5. This one really is a proof point in our journey towards accrediting our software-defined community cloud and the approach that we've taken to get that across the finish line. We worked very closely with our partners in the government to make sure that we have the isolation controls in place to achieve this accreditation, and really opens up a broad spectrum of offerings for our customers that are interested in supplying the Defense Department. US regions and support, this is kind of a catch-all that a lot of my enterprise customers really like to enjoy, that allow us to comply with those controls, but also decouples necessarily from a compliance framework. And then finally, CJIS. CJIS was also a really fun one to work on because you have to have these fingerprint background checks by the FBI and carrying around a briefcase and all sorts of fancy stuff. So we did CJIS over the last couple years as well. And again, that really helps us with customers that are working in state and local especially, and also, of course, with law enforcement. And then, of course, IRS 1075. This one also tends to come through for state and local customers, but we also see it in other areas for financial services where this is important. Okay, And again, I kind of mentioned or alluded to sovereignty. The same technology that we use to build our government capabilities and our US public sector supply chain are the same capabilities we also are using to achieve our sovereign cloud outcomes. And I have some partners here today that have been working with me on that. Like I mentioned, Archana presented earlier this morning on this. And this is a really, really key capability. The way we view sovereignty is across these three areas: data, operational, and software. For data sovereignty, that's something that you can work with us to supply, and we do that with a handful of controls that I've already mentioned, but one extra from an encryption perspective. Data location, very, very important for our data sovereignty customers. Personnel access controls, making sure the right people are supporting your cloud environment. And then we also offer external key management with key access justification that allows you to achieve those data sovereignty outcomes. And again, all built on that same software-defined community cloud technology. What's really cool about this is you get to build workloads for your US public sector customers and build the same thing for your European customers with sovereign-sensitive workloads. Again, reducing that complexity and cost of being able to supply software capabilities in cloud to all of your regulated customers globally. And this is really the journey we're on. Operational sovereignty is also really important for us. So on the operational sovereignty spectrum, we're working with our partners. Like I mentioned, there's a few here today. So if you're interested in that, come talk to me afterward. I'll connect you with some cool people. And operational sovereignty allows us to work with local partners to achieve different sovereign outcomes. And then finally, software sovereignty. We do have products that are capable on this spectrum as well. And software sovereignty is a really tricky one. This is hard. And this is where you typically see air-gapped environments. And of course, we do have offerings that allow air-gapped capabilities as well. Again, come chat with me afterward if you have questions on that. But if you're talking about compliance today, especially US public sector, you might have questions about JWCC and some of the other capabilities that the US government's looking for. So that's really the spectrum that we play with in terms of data sovereignty, operational, and software sovereignty, and how it's built on the exact same technology we're using for our government cloud customers. All right, so with that, I'm going to wind down and talk a little bit less and look to my friends here on stage. Thank you again so much for joining me today. So for starters, let's talk to Ashlea.
Hi guys. So in the intro I mentioned a little bit about what I do at Equifax. We are obviously up here from a platform engineering perspective. If you think about that, in addition to platform engineering, I also lead our cloud transformation, and it's something that we are very diligent about to continue doing everything we can in the cloud security space to continue to increase our security posture and all of those things. I'm also a stakeholder for our compliance and what you would consider governance and what I call platform architecture. So there's architecture spread across, but what we have to do with our org structure and what we have to do with all of our workloads really matter. So.
Awesome, thank you. Ganesh, I know you introed briefly, but maybe you can go a little bit deeper briefly.
Sure. Again, I head the platform engineering at Broadcom. So when you say platform engineering, we're essentially talking of all the design, architecture, building those core foundational pieces. Yeah. That includes infrastructure, like network security. Also includes the Kubernetes orchestration layer, which is kind of bread and butter for us. We run most of our services in GKE. So that orchestration layer is also part of the platform. And we also offer various foundational services on top of that. Say what we call as Kubernetes operators. These are like stateful services that we offer, databases, Elasticsearch, Kafka, et cetera, that our SaaS services can consume. So that's what my team does as part of platform engineering.
Thank you, Ganesh. All right, so let's start with you, Ashlea. So can you tell us a little bit, well, you already did this a little bit more, but let's go a little bit more into Equifax itself, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So I mentioned a little bit about my role, but what Ganesh just touched on, there's also a huge component that I touch and that me and all of my teams are responsible for around when we say foundational controls, right? So that baseline configuration, infrastructure as code, policy as code, and anything that we have to account for so that we ensure when we do hand off cloud environments, we're trying to give as much as possible as a default so that our application teams and our developers and engineers only need to worry about what they have to do. In addition to that, there's also, Equifax as a company, we're a global data analytics and technology company, and we're also a credit agency. So if you think about regulatory workloads and the complexities that those bring to the table, there's a huge part of it, but we also play it back into our Equifax mission, which is to live your financial best. So all things that we do kind of wrap around that, overarching goal for how we're running not only for our customers, but also what we're doing at the foundational layer.
Yeah, that's awesome, and thank you so much. I've been working with your team for the last couple of years, and it's been an absolute honor to help you on that journey. Okay, so next question here. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you're using Google Cloud and some of the products around those services that you're supplying?
Absolutely. So if you think about where we started in cloud transformation and where we've landed, we actually rolled out GCP back in 2019, and we rolled it out as our enterprise platform. So Google is a data platform, and it was intended to, really cater to those needs. And we definitely latched onto that as Equifax. All things revolves around data. So, we rolled it out as our enterprise platform, and then we also are ensuring that even though we are multi-cloud, we're being very prescriptive about what needs to live in which cloud platform, right? And then on top of that, if you talk about services, we're probably using the same services as others. You've got BigQuery, you've got Bigtable, Cloud SQL, Cloud Functions, Dataproc, Dataflow, all of those kind of standard, what I consider core services. But then another big one is VPC service controls. So that equally probably 3 years, maybe 2019, rolled out as well. But that also kind of became an additional layer that Equifax attached to for us to have a second layer of control for data exfiltration. So we've been able to look at VPC service controls beyond kind of how it started and identify areas where we ultimately don't use a service unless it's supported. And that just, even though we've got our own Equifax controls, compensating controls, it provides an additional layer of security protection.
Awesome, thank you. And then do you mind talking to us a little bit about the regulations that were on the journey with you?
Yeah, so when we talk about regulatory workloads, I know you referenced some of them on the slide. We've got FedRAMP, we have CJIS, and there's TextRAMP and all of the other ramps, right? There's a lot in that list. Yeah. And as a whole, we've been able to look at assured workloads to identify what controls does it already give us on top of what we already have. And there are a few where they overlap, right? We're already accounting for it, but it doesn't hurt to have a secondary layer of that control on the Google side. So, we also, obviously, it's touching all things U.S. public sector. And we talked about CJIS. That's a little bit new to us based off of an acquisition, but we are continuing to get our feet wet in that space and figure out not only what we would need to do for assured workloads for CJIS, but also FedRAMP, and if there's any ability to kind of consolidate some of those objectives around our controls.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Ganesh, let's go to you. And do you mind telling us a little bit more about kind of what your team does? I know you did in the intro, but maybe a double click on that.
Sure. Maybe a little bit intro of the company itself, right? So Broadcom is a very large enterprise software company. People recognize us for what we've done in the silicon semiconductor space, but we are a very large enterprise software company as well. We've been acquisitive and we've been buying companies for the last 5 years. And we have a wide portfolio of products, both in on-prem and SaaS. So where our Google journey kind of started was adopting Google as our SaaS platform, as a foundational SaaS platform. That's how our journey started, where we went ahead with the large transformation exercise for SaaS, where we not just re-platformed, we kind of containerized applications, made them more microservice friendly, things like that, and then moved it into the Google Cloud. Right? So from that perspective, we've been on this SaaS journey in Google for about 4 years now, and almost all of our SaaS services run inside Google. So this is a large portfolio of many industry-leading solutions consumed by all the Fortune 500, if you will. And because we have so much of customer data, it's extremely sensitive from a security perspective. So from a security compliance perspective, it's really critical for us that we are in this journey, particularly with Assured Workloads.
Yeah, it's been really fun working actually with both of your teams on this journey. And actually, I remember presenting roadmap of achieving CGIS and Impact Level 5 and all this stuff years ago. To finally be here together is really fun. It's really exciting. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about how you're using GCP and what are some of the products and services you're using?
Sure. Again, GCE, the compute engine, of course, is our mainstay. But most of our SaaS services, almost all of it, run inside Kubernetes, GKE. So GKE is core to us, right? So we also consume several other services from Google on the ML side, BigQuery, say, for example, Dataproc, now Vertex AI. So, but to us, GKE is foundational to everything that we do in SaaS.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. Well, let's tell, wrong button, sorry. So do you mind telling us a little bit more about the regulations and what we're working with for some of your federal customers?
Sure. So we have customer data all over the place. And as I said, that kind of puts us in a spot where we need to be compliant. So we've been doing SOC 2 for ages now. We do ISO. We also have a service where we do PCI DSS. That's for well over a decade now. We've been doing PCI DSS, now PCI 3DS for a long time now. For our federal customers, it's FedRAMP is a mandatory compliance. Yeah. We've been FedRAMP compliant for, I think, for about 4 to 5 years now. Started off with FedRAMP moderate. Now we're in the journey of doing FedRAMP high for some of the products. We are also doing Impact Level 4 for one of the products for our DoD customer. Yeah. So we are big into this because we're trying to get all our products into this space because we have a lot of federal customers.
Excellent. Well, it's so fun working with you on that. I know it's been quite the journey. How's Assured Workloads specifically helping your team and what you're doing on this journey to get there from a business perspective?
Assured Workloads has been a great boon. I think Ashlea touched upon this one, right? So our customers are U.S. government agencies. For us, it's really important about this U.S. person, U.S. soil. We need to make sure that only the people with the right clearance have access to the infrastructure. So right off the bat, we inherit so many controls from Assured Workloads that helps us in the journey of certification. We all know how hard it is to go through this, right? Yeah. The US soil, the data residency part, which you covered in your presentation as well, CJ, right? So that's very important too. And Assured Workloads gives us the guardrails to make sure that we consume the right services, because not all services are at the same level of certification. Some are medium, high, IL4, right? Make sure that we have the right services. Also, make sure that we use the right regions, right? So the data is not exfiltrating out to somewhere where we have a problem, right? So Assured Workloads gives us the right guardrails to make sure that not only for certification, but for us to run Conmon, right, beyond certification. Sure. We need to make sure that we are within the compliance zone, right? So that's the first part. The second part, probably more interesting, more important to us from an engineering perspective, is that we have built a fairly large commercial platform. Yeah. Where all of the SaaS services that we run are in the GCP platform. So it's really important for us that we have an identical but independent platform, right? So what I mean by that is the same set of configurations that I have, the same capabilities that I get, the services should behave the exact same way, right? That's what I get in Assured Workloads, also making sure that it is compliant. So purely from an engineering perspective, it gives me the consistency. I'm able to standardize my automation. I don't create a snowflake just to maintain a FedRAMP environment, right? So it's exactly the same. My commercial environment is exactly the same as my federal environment. From a business perspective, that helps me as well, because as I said, all of these services are running in SaaS today. So when it comes to FedRAMP, the time to certify is kind of time to market, right? Yeah. So I have the services already running. If I run this in Assured Workloads, I can get them to market very quickly. So that gives me a competitive edge in this space.
Yeah.
As I said, we are FedRAMP compliant for some of the products. We are in the IL4 journey along with you, and hopefully we get there in the next few quarters, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, I love what you were saying there about the consistency. And that was one of the lessons we learned the hard way, honestly, was running bespoke government environments really led to a lot of problems and drift from a security perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And when we set out to build assured workloads, that was one of the things we wanted to do. But I love that you're saying that, because our goal was to share that same experience and try to ensure that our customers didn't have to go through that pain of having different environments for different outcomes. So I'm really happy it's working. Don't act surprised.
Thanks for all your support.
Right? Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, cool. Well, with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new and what's coming up. So, of course, I'm always really excited talk about what my team's working on. So a couple new capabilities and new features. One that we're launching actually this month right now is resource level monitoring. One of the things that we're doing with assured workloads is, like Ganesh mentioned, we're working on guardrails, right? And I would put these into the box of preventative controls, right, when I geek out on compliance. So we stack as many preventative controls into the front end of assured workloads when you're bootstrapping, but we also have detective controls. So we monitor the environment for drift and any problems that might be popping up from a compliance perspective to help with the Kanban journey and also just help with compliance in general. We know these things happen. Of course, prevention is the key, but you have to be able to detect and respond as well. So with that, we've added resource level monitoring. It's a really cool capability. We've had monitoring for a while, but now we go deeper and we get down to the actual resources in your resource hierarchy. So we've launched that recently as well. Free trials, we've been doing this for a little while. One of the challenges with compliance is always getting started. So one of the things we've been trying to do is simplify the experience, and we've launched free trials recently. So please come and get a free trial. We're giving those out. TLS version restriction. Actually, this originally came from FedRAMP, but also PCI DSS. And as you can imagine, for a hyperscale cloud provider, we love TLS. And in fact, one of the co-authors on the TLS 1.0 paper is on our team, which was really exciting for me when I joined Google. But anyway, so a lot of the compliance frameworks require ensuring that you have the right TLS version for your environment. And we've launched a new policy that allows you to make sure that's in place. And prevents you from accidentally using the wrong TLS policy. Super useful for PCI DSS and also super useful for FedRAMP. They're very, very picky about that. Along with FIPS. They love TLS and they love FIPS. So those are the two areas we've worked on that. We've been working on improved confidential compute integration, and some members from our team are talking about confidential compute this week. Super cool technology. I'm a big believer. So if you get a chance, go check out those sessions. And then move analysis. So one of the other issues, of course, is helping customers come into the compliant environment. So we've launched a new move analysis capability that helps you along that journey. And that's been launched recently as well. We're, of course, expanding the offerings for the markets that you can have access to. Impact Level 5 is now GA, and we've added new services in the last month. So, this is our North Star, really. We want every service to be super duper compliant in all of the offerings. Unfortunately, it's a long journey to get there. So this will be what we're going through is constantly adding new services. This is a big focus for our organization and team, and a lot of what we're focusing on over the next really years to come. I mentioned ITAR earlier. Like I said, I'm really excited about ITAR because ITAR really impacts my government supply chain customers. A lot of folks don't even know that they're impacted by ITAR. And this has been an area that was exceptionally difficult to accomplish. And we accomplished it in some really cool ways in terms of the controls and implementation we're doing on the back end of the infrastructure. And a lot of teams at Google put in a lot of effort to get this done. But really, it is kind of the high watermark. In a lot of ways, it's even harder than FedRAMP, because FedRAMP, of course, is a compliance system, which means you can work with the government to understand risk and make sure you're navigating and working through all those issues. With ITAR, there's no such thing. It's, my lawyer would call it the stop sign law. You're either there or you're not. You're stopped or you're not. So for ITAR, it was kind of a high watermark for us, and launching that into production was a really big deal, and we're really proud of that. It's also made it a lot simpler for us to achieve our other compliance systems as well, given that it's the high watermark. Once we're there, a lot of other things get a lot easier. But we've also expanded services there over the last year, and there's some new capabilities. Sovereign controls have expanded recently as well. I mentioned a few regions, and I'm about to mention a few more, that we've been launching sovereign controls into. And the service expansion is happening there as well. So new services are becoming available, and we have access to new sovereign capabilities. And then new sovereign regions. We're working on Japan, Italy, and Spain. That adds to our growing list of capabilities, like I mentioned, the United States, Canada, Israel, Australia, and then, of course, Germany, France, EU, Italy, Spain, and Japan. So long list and a lot of capabilities available for you. And like I mentioned earlier, our North Star is to make it consistent, reduce the total cost by making it a lot easier for you to have access to those environments, whether those be directly from Google or through our sovereign partners as well. Okay, and then just to kind of highlight a few of these other ones in terms of the partner solutions for assured workloads, and these are our regulated sovereign solution partner initiative that we've got going here as well. So we're excited about this. On there, you've got, of course, Symantec, our friends from Broadcom, involved with that one. Veeam, NetApp, MongoDB, Lytix, Nasuni, Server General, Fortinet, Citrix, and Elastic are in the program today. So we're really excited about these partners and bringing them into our regulated and sovereign big family. I'll call it a family, why not? Okay. Another thing that I'm really excited about, this has been kind of something that I've been dreaming about really for years, is reducing the cost and complexity of getting your authorization to operate, or ATO. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's quite the journey. And for those that have gone through that journey before, of course, the relationship is the work that you do with yourself, the work that you do with your cloud provider, the work you do with consultants, and then the work that you do with your 3PAO. And what we're working with is a combination with Carahsoft, Coalfire, StackArmor, and Second Front to really reduce the total cost here and accelerate the process by which you can get your authority to operate, or ATO. And again, that can be used to accelerate FedRAMP, StateRAMP, or any of the impact level accreditations that you're searching for. And again, I wish when I had started, this was an offering available to me, because this was hard. So really, really excited about this. And again, what we're doing here is we're offering credits to help along this journey, help with that federal and state contract vehicle access from Carahsoft. That's really exciting. Again, when I set out, that was another thing that I really wish I had access to, are those contract vehicles. So working with our partners to gain access to those. And then, of course, access to expertise from Coalfire, StackArmor, and Second Front to get those ATOs. So some really interesting capabilities. Like I said, I'm really, really excited about this one. And working with our partners to accelerate your journey into cloud, especially into FedRAMP. All right, so I'm going to call it a few other sessions here, because we're going to call up my buddies. But then we'll open it up to questions, and hopefully you'll ask all of the GovCloud, assured workloads, and sovereign cloud questions that you can imagine, and my friends here can help with that. So the other sessions to look out for is what's next for those security professionals, security foundations for every production workload, how to mitigate data exfiltration risks with Google Cloud Security Controls. Of course, one of my favorites there is the confidential computing work. And then Deloitte's doing some work as well, which is the multinational compliance in a single cloud with assured workloads. Again, my super cute assured workloads baby, so go check that one out too. And then build the security foundation with Trusted Cloud as well. So recommend each of these sessions. A lot of my good friends are presenting. And thank you so, so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.